I am so glad that everyone's here today and we can have this really important conversation around navigating the complexities of system ownership. And honestly, I can't think of anyone more qualified to have this conversation than Daniel. So, Daniel, welcome and thank you for being here with us today. It's so good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you as well. This is awesome.
So, to tell you a little bit about Daniel, I know some of you already know him. If you're a podcast junkie, you must subscribe to his podcast, Practical AI. By far, my favorite podcast on the topic. And it's really practical and really enjoyable. So, on your next trail run, you're walking the dog, pop that in. So, he's thinking about AI broadly all the time. Besides being a trained data scientist and a professor working in this area, he is the CEO and founder of an organization called Prediction Guard. So, Daniel, can you tell us all a little bit about Prediction Guard and what you're doing? And really, I'd love to hear just an exciting story, a use case. Maybe when you go on a sales call, what kind of impact are you seeing with this technology?
Yeah, well, thank you, Yvonne. This is great. I think to give a little bit of context for Prediction Guard, I would maybe refer to, if people haven't seen it yet, there's a Praxis redemptive AI thesis, and one of the kind of redemptive directions that they talk about in that thesis is restoring trust in human institutions that are using AI through transparency and privacy. And that's really kind of key to the heart of what we're doing with Prediction Guard, and recognizing that especially companies, organizations that are working with very sensitive data, they're working in regulated industries, potentially have various security privacy concerns. The way to sort of build trustworthy AI solutions in those contexts is to actually have that AI functionality be brought in-house in a company's infrastructure in their own network, and actually have a platform that's built sort of from the ground up, secure from the ground up, where models can, scanned models for vulnerabilities can be launched into scalable and secure model servers, and served through an easy to use API. And so that's what we're wanting to provide to people with Prediction Guard, is a platform that they can host internally, which will allow them to kind of come into alignment with the kind of risk assessment frameworks that are being developed by NIST and OWASP and others, so that they can have a system that's completely under their control, a system where they have transparency, where they can protect users' privacy. And ultimately, we believe that that's a way, a redemptive venture that will help kind of restore trust in organizations that are using this technology.
Well, as a CTO, I can tell you that I'm very thankful that you've built this type of technology. There's a lot of questions around, like you said, privacy, security, control, just configurability. There's different use cases that you'll want to deploy using this tech. Um, what's like I said earlier, what's one sort of like amazing story? I know I've seen
Mm,
you do some work in the healthcare industry, for example,
yeah.
just how this technology is being deployed in innovating ways.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if you think about really some of the things that are most exciting for me are ways that this technology is actually enhancing or expanding human agency, rather than kind of taking human agency away, and actually allowing people to operate in really powerful ways. One story, we have a customer. It's called SimWorks. They have a platform that provides a kind of medic co-pilot for field medics, like those medics either in EMS or disaster relief or military scenarios, where they might go into a situation and there's nine casualties that they're having to treat at a single time. And various vitals that they have to monitor, care guidelines that they have to follow. They have to triage very quickly, and they have a platform that actually tracks that and charts that, and then provides an AI capability to help those medics prioritize and follow the appropriate care guidelines, so they can ask questions to get the appropriate care guidelines for the situation that they're dealing with, but also proactively receive suggestions in terms of triage and prioritization. And obviously, if that's the situation, you can realize that first of all, there's a huge amount of security privacy concerns related to PHI and personal information. But also, it's a very high impact scenario, right? So the actual quality of the output of the AI system is very important, and so all of this kind of comes together. What AI models they're using, where those are hosted, how they validate the output, how they prevent sort of malicious use of the system. All of those kind of come together in that. And if I can paste the link in, but if you want to see more about that, if you just search CNN Intel Prediction Guard, or Prediction Guard Intel CNN, something like that, it should come up. There's a video story about that if you want to learn more.
So, keying into the privacy and security considerations, I know that I'm hearing from a lot of people. People are asking me, hey, Vaughn, what are the things that I really need to hone in on when I think about privacy and security? So, if you were to give advice to an organization who's new at this, who's
Yeah.
considering this technology, what would you say?
Yeah, so it's quite a challenge because this topic of security privacy related to AI is very bloated right now. People talk about it in very different ways in different contexts. They mean different things. I think a first thing that I would highlight is all of your organizations or companies or wherever you're coming from have likely dealt with data security and data privacy concerns in the past, and actually, likely your organization has a data protection policy. And the first thing I would say is the way that we use this latest wave of technologies is by integrating our own data with these systems, often via retrieval or via tool usage. And so it's actually a lot about the flow of data and your sort of data security practices. And so I would say don't sort of throw the baby out with the bathwater. Trust your security team, your legal team who have developed kind of data protection policies. Those likely protect a lot of what you might want to think about, like what sort of data can be sent and stored outside of your own infrastructure, outside of your own network. What data needs to stay internal? How do you need to protect things like PII and PHI and those sorts of things? So first thing is, don't don't throw out your security team. Don't throw out your existing policies. That's likely a very good start for what you need to consider. The other things that I would say is, and I'm very opinionated on this subject, so take it for what it's worth. But one thing that I think you should realize is that there's kind of a difference when we talk about AI models, where if you really want to be transparent in the AI systems that you're using and have kind of full control over what happens and auditability and all of that, it's useful to know that there are sort of AI models, quote unquote, that are closed, and these would be kind of like OpenAI, Anthropic, Cohere, etc. And those there is a model in those systems, but they're productized systems, meaning when you put in your input into those systems, there's various processing steps before your input goes into the model that you don't have control over, and various processing steps after the output is generated from the model that you don't have control over. And various interesting things can happen because of that. And it has advantages and disadvantages. It has the disadvantage that you don't have full control over that system, and things can happen in that system that, for example, you can get moderated, or bias can be injected into the behavior of the model that you don't have full control over. The advantage is, of course, they're products and they're managed and they perform well, right? Generally, they scale well. You don't have to run infrastructure. But I think people need to realize that that's a product, not a model. And then on the other side, you can kind of have these models that you maybe do have full control of the processing with. But the disadvantage is you have to figure out how to run those at scale and host them. Right. So there's on the model side just an awareness of kind of products versus models and what happens kind of under the hood with some of these systems.
And that really
Then
speaks to the configurability challenge, right? So understanding, what are the use cases that are best for this infrastructure, for
right.
this model, and then looking at long term, how do you maintain these systems?
Hmm.
Because it's not something you just spin up and walk away from.
Yeah.
Any thoughts around, what you're seeing your clients do in terms of how they're handling that sort of long range planning for these systems?
Yeah. Yeah, I was in a meeting with a uh, bank maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, and this question was brought up. It's like, how do we? The basic question is, things are moving so quickly, and we could choose to invest in this technology in a particular way, and then be irrelevant in the future. And I think the best advice I could give is to sort of uh, consider the reality that no one on the face of the planet knows what are going to be the greatest AI workflows and processes even 6 months from now. It's not defined. ChatGPT is not the killer AI app. We're yet to see what those sort of best things are in terms of how they're integrated into an organization or a company. Um, so that means at the application level, there's a risk of you saying, well, this is the application that's going to be transformative for our company. That's most likely not going to be the case. That's going to change at the application level. At the model level, it's also the same in the sense that there's going to be continued rapid development of models, and the future of model usage is going to be very much multi-model. So it's also true that you can't just say, well, good, we found GPT 4.0, and that's the model that will transform our company
People
into the
think that
future.
though.
Because,
People
yeah,
do think that, like, I
it is
one
true.
do everything that I need it to do, but that's not the case, is it?
It's not. Yeah. So I think you should realize what we kind of generally recommend to people is, if you architect your systems and your strategy around the assumption that you could swap out the model, or you will need to swap out the model, or you might need to use multiple models. Now that helps you kind of think through, well, what is the platform where we can use multiple models? Maybe that is kind of a combination of open and closed models. Maybe it's multiple closed models. Maybe it's multiple open models. There's different scenarios that are relevant there, but I think you need to architect your systems with the assumption that the models will be changing over time, and there's going to be a multi-model future, and that it's likely going to the application level is likely going to change. So the, going forward with those two assumptions doesn't mean you can't do anything, but you should assume, hey, in this scenario, can I swap out the model if I wanted to? That's a question you could ask in terms of what you're building. And then also, hey, there's this application we're investing in. What happens if a different application comes out at the application level, or what is our strategy for introducing new AI features or new AI applications in our organization, because it'll likely continue to develop over time quickly.
So it's definitely about evolution, things will evolve. And so
Mhm.
I wanna connect, 2 things here. So, um, as you think about these, tools and you're integrating them into your current ecosystem, you know, there's also the cost component. So it's
Mhm.
integrating into legacy systems and then leaving room for experimentation, which is what you're saying
Mhm.
here. How do you balance that? I mean, because I would hate to see organizations not adopt these technologies because those challenges are too great. How will we pay for it?
Yeah.
How will it integrate into existing systems?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I think the good news there is if you look at how the sort of ecosystem is developing, the closed model providers have kind of plateaued in terms of model performance advances. And what that means is that open models have caught up in terms of performance, and at the same time, smaller models are getting better and better and catching up to larger models, where these smaller models, and what I mean by smaller models is, you could think of a Llama 3.2 or a Llama 3.1 that's small and you could run on your laptop versus something that you would need a cluster of GPUs to run. Those smaller models are catching up rapidly um, to the larger models in terms of performance, especially if for kind of enterprise workflows that exhibit some repeatability and aren't kind of general purpose that you're building internally. So these sorts of models, thankfully, are increasingly able to run on CPUs, are increasingly able to run sort of in even serverless ways where you can spin them up or scale them down to zero, so you're not spinning on compute all the time. And there's a lot of different platforms out there that will allow you to do this. And this again comes to some of these considerations around data flow, where are you okay with sending your data to a third party? Are you not able to do that? If you don't have data security concerns, certainly infrastructure wise, the commoditization of AI APIs has made that usage almost free at this point. But that comes with the cost of sending a bunch of data externally, right? Internally, it's increasingly cheaper and cheaper to host these models internally in a whole variety of frameworks, whether that be, you know, a platform like Prediction Guard or any number of open source kind of model serving frameworks or other model serving frameworks. And those can increasingly run on Intel hardware or CPUs and not on very expensive GPUs. And so that's encouraging for companies, and I would say that trend will continue. So if you're trying to, we can't go through all of the maybe technical details in this conversation, but if you're thinking about this for your organization, I would just encourage people to be asking the right questions like, hey, do we really need to use a large model? Hey, do we really need to use GPUs? What are some ways that we can run this on more commodity hardware? Can we send data externally to third-party services where we don't manage the infrastructure? These are all the right questions that you should be asking.
That's really helpful. Let's talk about where things are going. So future trends. You already leaned into that a little bit, talking about from a cost perspective. Some of these systems will be more affordable. I believe that to be the case, and I'm seeing that happen. But what are other trends in terms of the way where these tools are going? Is there anything that you're seeing? Because again, you're out there, you're talking to
Mhm.
different people in different industries. um, what are you learning?
Yeah. Um, yeah, so I think that there, I'll highlight a few trends here. Um, One of those would be what people are generally kind of realizing around these systems needing to be composite or um, almost orchestrators of tools. So, an example of this that we've talked about in the Bible translation industry is, there's already great tools for spell checking translations or like replacing keywords or typesetting or all of these sorts of things. Those tools can be sort of clunky to use. People have to learn how to use them. And so if you imagine these systems as the combination of the AI general purpose model that orchestrates interactions with other tools that are kind of purpose built, whether those be rules based or other AI tools. you could have an interaction where someone could say, "Hey, I need to replace this keyword, everywhere in this draft of my translation," and have the AI system then make the appropriate API calls or function calls into other tools to accomplish that, which allows the user to have a more fluid and natural interaction, but allows you to leverage the underlying tools that have been built over years and years in whatever context you're operating in. So that's a kind of composite tool usage scenario. I think the other thing we're seeing is definitely a trend towards multimodality, which is has been going on for some time, but we see very much a push in this direction now. We just had the QTI folks on the podcast. They were the ones that released the Moshi model, which beat OpenAI to the first publicly available speech to speech AI assistant. And we'll see more of that speech to speech. We'll see Amazon just released and is talking about kind of any modality to any modality types of models, and these will allow us, of course, to interact with the world uh, along multiple dimensions, because text sort of only represents certain elements of our reality. And I think that from a redemptive standpoint is really encouraging, because it gives us opportunity to not only interact via text, but in contexts where people are using sign language, or there's less literacy, or oral cultures, or interacting with existing video libraries like Lumo or Jesus Film, or the Bible Project videos. There's all of these ways that we can leverage all of the amazing content that's been produced over years and years in a multimodal way. So that's another trend that I would highlight. And the probably the thing that people are talking about a lot is kind of agents, AI agents moving forward. Um, we'll see how that develops. And if you don't know, an AI agent is just uh, an AI system that would receive a query from you and determine what steps it needs to take to accomplish the given stated goal or objective of a scenario, and then execute those steps automatically and potentially evaluate itself until it gets to a certain goal. Certainly, there's a huge number of people exploring this. It's still fairly unreliable, but people are going to continue to explore it. And what I would encourage people on this call to think about is how can we think about human and AI agent teaming that, again, enhances our human agency in a redemptive way, or maybe even drives us together relationally as humans, rather than isolating us um, away from the real world, um, or isolating us one against another human wise. I think there's a huge opportunity for that, but it takes intentionality to think about AI interactions that actually drives us together relationally in a human sense, and also expands our human agency to do certain things, or advocate for ourselves, or accomplish certain things that are redemptive, rather than just automating our life away.
I really like that you're sharing that, because that is a misnomer, right? That, AI will take the human out of the equation, and redemptively, we want to keep the human at the center of
Mm.
the equation, right? The experience. So, if anyone has a question, I'd love for you to go ahead and pop it into chat. We just have a couple more minutes here of this conversation. So, while I'm waiting for some questions to come in, I'd love to ask, what's one piece of advice that you would give to A, leaders, and then B, builders, right?
Mhm.
So, representing builders here, I feel like, I'm having to be that translation layer between,
Mhm.
here are the capabilities of these tools, and here's how this could impact our organization. What would you recommend, on both sides of the equation? What should leaders be asking, and what should builders be offering to help meet the needs in their
Mhm.
organization?
Yeah, I think from a leadership standpoint, what I would encourage is just for you and your own organization within the constraints that you're operating in, kind of data wise, security, privacy wise, to figure out some way for people in your organization to experiment and gain intuition with this technology and actually openly experiment and try things. Because one of the things that I've learned about this technology is you can have some kind of use cases in your mind. If you haven't actually got hands-on with the technology and experimented, it's very hard to kind of gain the intuition around what will be valuable in your organization. How hard is this going to be? How hard is that going to be? And so I would just encourage um, experimentation hands-on and finding a way to create that sort of environment in your organization within the proper bounds of what makes sense in your organization, but trying to get there. um, from the builder's side, um, uh, I I definitely think that there's there's an opportunity to kind of help overcome some of the disillusionment with this technology that we're seeing, which you can throw up a really cool demo of using this technology to do X or Y thing, and it works like 80% of the time, and that's really fun and amazing because you can see the potential, but it can be hard to get that last bit of performance out of these AI driven systems. And so for builders, I think I would encourage you all to really dig into some of those kind of bring some of those software best practices to the table and say, well, just because it's AI doesn't mean we can't have um, uh, tests and evaluations of these systems and debugging workflows and best practices. And you all kind of get it's an exciting time because you all kind of get to help define what those things are and figure those out. So dig in there and help kind of bring about that reliability. Is what I would encourage.
And we're seeing great strides in that area at GMO in terms of just testing methodology and some tooling that's out there because it's different, right? It's not a yes or no. It could be that you
Mhm.
have a range of possibilities that are still accurate. So we're having to really sort of rethink just automated testing, but it's bringing a lot of really good conversation to the forefront. And we're to the point where we're automating most of that testing now. So just even going through the process, I think of experimenting and then saying, how, if I think about the development life cycle, would I um, deploy and maintain this system just using best practices and you'll adjust along the way. I have a couple minutes left here. So always love to ask this question if there is a book or a podcast or something that you're reading that's inspiring you.
Mm,
I'm always asking for good books. I've been reading one called 2045 Faithful AI,
mhm,
and it's a series of essays about what the world might look like in 2045, and
mhm.
it's written by Christians. So that's helped me sort of open my eyes to what's possible. What is Daniel reading?
Well, a
Maybe you're
variety
writing.
of things. I'm right now I'm listening to the Children of Hurin, Tolkien book.
Nice.
So I don't know how that's influencing my AI work, but I really enjoying it. Um, uh,
Creativity?
yeah, creatively. I do think that that actually is an element of this. And this is might be a tangent from your question, but I think we have a creative opportunity to paint a different picture of an AI future than is the sort of only one being promoted within our culture. So culturally, if you look at all the AI movies on Netflix, there's a theme, and that theme is AI is scary, it's going to take over, and we'll never get to come back from it. And so I do think there's a opportunity for creatives in the audience to actually create new writing new movies, new visions of a more redemptive AI future. But that's a maybe a tangent.
I like
Um,
that. I just posted that book, Faithful AI
mhm,
Stories from 2045, and it's very much that. So these are writers, obviously, that are taking creative license, but I think just even artists and other creatives, they can give us something visually, to experience, or
mhm.
even, read or hear that might inspire what could be, and, of course, from a redemptive perspective.